Alright guys, let's quiet down. So we're going to play a couple videos to start off the training.
Sorry, bud. Getting around a little late today. But don't worry. We'll get you there on time. You gonna score a big goal for me tonight, bud?
I'll try my best, Dad.
Right on. That sounds awesome.
Sir, what's your son's name? Logan. Okay, Logan, I'm going to hold your neck here, okay? We've got 2 patients. One's critical. We'll need another unit and more than a
Okay, so this one really got you pumping, right? This one really super, right? So that just shows you what can go wrong, especially out on the roads. Like when you're on an NBA, it's so important for you to be safe, for you to be looking, knowing where your surroundings are. Always not have your back to traffic like that dude. You just have to be really safe, know where you are, know where everything else is. So that really shows you. The next video was made by Chris Coleman, so.
Thank you, Chris.
These are some pointers. So when you're bringing out the stretcher, you want to notice what's around you. You want to notice the type of surface. If you're on a smooth driveway, it'll be better for you. If you see a bunch of cracks, you have to be aware of that, especially when you're moving the patient. If you're on grass, if you need to go on grass, you want to make sure you have 4 people on at all time, because the front person and then the back person, it could go over a bump and fall sideways as we saw a lot in the video. So you want to have 4 people, 2 on the end, 2 on the other side. Will I fit? So if you're going into a house, you have to make sure you know which equipment you're bringing in. If the stretcher won't fit, you have to find a Reeves, you have to find stair chair. You want to make sure you know where, like you can't spend so much time on scene figuring out where to, like what to move them with, so you have to anticipate what you need. So 2 people holding the ends at all times. 1 on the front, 1 on the back. The person in the front typically just drags the patient along, and then the person on the back is very important because you have the scope of where you're going. So if you're pushing it, you know, you can see the surface in front of you. You can see any obstacles in the way. So that person is really important, but also you need 2 people on at all times. As you saw in the video, no people leads to bad things, obviously. But even if 1 person, you can't control the weight of the people. It'll just go to the side, and then you can have a bad accident. And then the head of the stretcher, again, is a very important place to be because you have the scope of where everything is. When you're moving somebody, especially on an uneven surface, you want it to be low to the ground. Because if it's super high up, it has more of a risk of going one way or the other. So if you have it low, you have a better center of gravity, and you can move them faster. What is your exit plan again? Anticipate where you're going to move them, what path you're going to take. If there's like a path to the house, you're going to want to take that instead of going on the uneven grass. And which direction to move the patient. So you always want to move them in a vertical line. You never want to move them sideways. Because if you're moving them sideways, just a pebble, and you can go over a pebble and then it'll flip it over.
Again, Kate said it pretty much, but patient goes feet first at all times. We were talking about it with Bob Voss the other day, and that just is for the patient. The patient can't see where they're going if they're head first. Even when you're, the only time they can like go head first is if you're putting them in the ambulance. But that you always have to have that. Don't wheel the patient horizontally or head first. As Kate said, if you're going horizontally, even if you have 2 people on the stretcher, it only takes a pebble and then it flips over. So never move it horizontally. Another thing that Carl recommended us talk about is always have 2 out of the 4 wheels touching the ground when lifting the patient. And there is a temptation a lot of the times just to, both people lift up the stretcher and get it over to where you need to go. But the 2 wheels on the ground, so you can pick up one side, but 2 is very important because if it does get any back, like side-to-side motion, there was a couple of cases in that video where even a little shift will, swing the whole thing over. So it is very important to just have those 2 wheels minimally on the ground to prevent that. And then collapse the back of the stretcher for tight areas. So any riders, how do you collapse the back of the stretcher? No idea. George.
So there's bar, pole, and a slide in. There's 2 bars and there's some thing, and you just push it.
What color things move?
Red.
There you go.
So
look at
as
the red
George
things.
said, like there are 2 little
Red.
there are 2 little like pulley things on the back of the stretcher where you put the AED or the life pack sometimes. You just pull those 2 little things in and collapse the back. A lot of elevators and stuff won't fit the stretcher if the back is collapsed, and it helps if you're trying to turn a patient in a hallway or something. So riders really make sure you know what that is. This was another thing. So this is an example of what we really don't want to see, is taking the patient out head first and walking with them head first. This is what we do want to see. So always keep that in mind. And always the person on the back of the stretcher, as Kate said, has the best scope of vision, but should also be pushing, because then the front person can steer. So it's really hard for someone in the front just to be pulling and they don't really know where the back is going. They should really be the one steering. So if you are on the back of the stretcher and that second person, you're responsible for pushing it forward. Oh yeah. So these are two other things we want to talk about. Does everyone know how to properly do shoulder straps on the stretcher? Okay, riders and EMT best case. You guys know how to do shoulder straps. Can someone tell me? Alright, pick someone. Ryan, okay.
There's the two straps on the back where they're hanging over. So there's like a little slot.
Yeah. So there are just two little like L things that go here, and as Ryan said, you just feed the two normal ones over through them, and shoulder strap. I believe that we're supposed to do shoulder straps legally on every call, so it is really important to try to do shoulder straps if possible on every call. And then the other thing is soft restraints down here. So for soft restraints, it's tempting to, when you're trying to restrain someone, to just put it on the bars that collapse, but you really should put it on the on anywhere on the frame of the stretcher, because the frame's not going to move. The bars have the possibility of someone bumping it, collapsing, or they could rip off, who knows. But the frame is made of metal and won't move. So whenever you're doing soft restraints on the arms or the legs, always make sure they're tied to some part of the frame of the stretcher. And then this is one other video we have quickly. This is just kind of troubleshooting the stretcher.
So let's talk about possible troubleshooting that you'll have to do with the power load system. Here's the first thing you need to know. Once the gurney's locked into place, the battery is constantly being charged. It should be unlikely that you ever have a dead battery. But what happens if you do have a dead battery? So you have no power to the gurney, but you have power to the load mechanism. What we're going to do is we're going to bring the gurney into the proper position and do our normal procedures and load the gurney into the locking mechanism. Again, you have power to the load system, so you'll see a yellow light turn to green light, which means you are ready to raise the legs. Two things need to happen. First, you need to depress the up button on the power load guide. Remember, you have no power to the gurney, so no buttons are working. That will raise your arms into the proper position. Once your arms are in the proper position, you'll have to manually lift up the legs. You're going to release the lever, and one of the crew members will then lift up the legs manually into the proper position. You'll release the latch, and then load the gurney properly into the ambulance. So we want to make sure that the power load system is being charged continuously. It's going to happen by two ways. One, when the unit's on, the power load system is being charged. When the unit's parked and the engine is off, we're going to plug into that shoreline to make sure that we're charging that system up. However, in the event there is a failure of the power load system, which means we have no power to the glide mechanism, what are we going to do? Well, it's very similar to what we currently do. We don't have a power load system in our regular ambulances. So before we can move the gurney into position, we have to move the glide system back to the rescue seat. And now it's like our regular system. I'm going to lift up the gurney to the proper load height. I'm going to roll it into and latch it into the hook. And then I will lift up our gurney with two-person lift and load it into the ambulance as we do right now. So here's the last troubleshooting point. In the event, what should be unlikely, that we have no power to the gurney and no power to the glide system. How are we going to maneuver that patient into the ambulance in that situation? We're going to move the glide system to the front of the ambulance and prepare for loading. Secondly, we're going to load the gurney as we normally do. Latch it into the proper spot, and we will manually lift up the legs and then load the gurney into the ambulance. As the gurney is rolling in, there's a locking mechanism underneath the gurney, and it will lock onto the power load system. You'll hear that click. Once that click occurs, the gurney is locked into the system. Just check it before you shut the doors. If we have a power failure in any system, the gurney, the power load system, once the call is done, your patient's been turned over to the hospital, you're going to write up a repair tag, drive over to HQ, and get into another ambulance.
Alright, does anyone have any questions on that stuff?
I think you need to emphasize when you're pulling the stretcher from the front to pull it from the side like you're carrying a suitcase and not like this. So you have a ton of control if you walk next to it. You're really apt to separate your shoulder pulling it from the front if the person behind you is not paying attention, and the stretcher You guys can finish the sentence for me. No, if the stretcher were to swing to the side quickly, you would get hurt.
Try not to.
Maybe
do
I saw that
the
happen
little
once.
click things that you're saying.
So yeah, so try, when you pull the stretcher, walk with the stretcher next to you when you're in front. Try to avoid pulling it like this. And you can see it, the guy that flipped over at the very beginning in that video, had he been on the side, maybe the stretcher would have flipped over. So that's the only thing I can tell you.
Does it work pretty much the same way if you have no power and you do all of that, and when you get to the hospital to unload, do you just use those red things to release the?
Yeah, so it should all work the same way. Like with if you have if the stretcher's dead, but the onboard unit is good, you just use the buttons on the onboard thing.
Right.
It should lower it for you.
But if you had none, you would just unclasp it, and then would, yeah.
You pull it down. You have to pull it down.
These old school structures, the gravity would just drop it. They just have a distance.
Yeah.
The legs.
Any other questions?
If no one else has any business,